Hey everybody, this is Ben Atkinson from LinkedIn, and this is our interview series, Inspiring Leadership and Challenging Times. So each week we interview a new inspiring leader on their journey in becoming a leader and the trials and tribulations they've had along the way. As always, my friend is joining us, Jonathan Bowman-Perks. He's an international expert in leadership and also a coach. Please, as we go along in this process, do like, share, comment, and ask questions. It'd be great to hear from you. Jonathan, who are we interviewing this week?
Well, thank you, Ben, and welcome to my favorite time of the week. I'm always worried about being an expert. An X is a has-been, and a spurt is a small drip under pressure. So I hope I'm not likened to that. We're very lucky this week to have Angie Klein, and Angie's at the moment in New Jersey. She has an office there with Verizon, and she's also works in New York as well. She's the VP of Consumer Segment Marketing at Verizon, one of the world's top global brands. She's had multiple VP leadership roles in wireless and what we call wireline. And she's been there for 19 years and loves that combination of helping her team do some blue sky thinking, but always grounded in evidence and data. So Angie, welcome. Great having you here.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me, both of you.
Great. Well, I think the first thing, we've got a lot of topics that we can talk about. You've been in the heart of COVID-19, and particularly your credo of run towards a crisis, not away at Verizon, which I so love. And also Black Lives Matter. It's a very big topic for us all. And you got some stories to tell there. You've also got some lovely stories to talk about the charity work that you do in your spare time, though you work so hard. I don't know if you have any spare time. And also lovely stories about coming from a small town in Nebraska where your family were farmers. So where do we begin? Perhaps we dealing with a crisis, the COVID-19 crisis, and your experience and your advice to people listening.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. First of all, Verizon has done an excellent job really stepping up to the leadership plate when it comes to COVID. And then, translating that into Black Lives Matter too. And when I think about our credo, which is kind of how we ground our employee base at Verizon and who we are, one of the lines of that credo is we run to a crisis, not away, as you said. And it has been part of our, DNA for a long time, whether it's hurricanes. I was part of the New York team when Hurricane Sandy hit years ago. And I just think back to that time, we lost about $1 billion worth of our network in lower Manhattan alone and 250 tons of copper. And we had a command center for about 4 months. And what you find is we have a playbook for crises at Verizon. And it is typically these disasters like hurricanes or wildfires or tornadoes. And we have a playbook that works. And when you think about COVID, that playbook didn't fully align. First of all, it was nationwide, certainly centered in pockets like New York, even more heavily at the start. But it wasn't a natural disaster. It was a health crisis coupled with an economic crisis, coupled with an employee crisis. And having to change all those things at once. And the leadership team still took the credo of run to a crisis and looked at our CEO defines our stakeholder group, says employees, customers, shareholders, and society. And when we look at how we prioritize those differently, employees probably became one of the first things that was a priority, getting our employee base home. We have thousands of call center reps, thousands of store reps, thousands of technicians that go into customers' homes, and of course, our management staff. Pretty easy to transition the management staff to work from home. Call center employees, quite different. Our technicians, almost difficult to they can garage from home, but they still have to do their work in the field. And we put our employees first, number one, figuring out how to get all of us in closing most of our stores across the country, putting our employees first there, and also customers. But also for those that couldn't work from home, doing incentive pay for those employees immediately, and working with them on the right things to do. Then you have our customers, which is kind of where my team really looked at what's happening to customers. Their lives are changing. They need more data. Our network was going to be taxed in different ways. People were using lots of data at home and all working from home suddenly across the country. And if you think about our network, it was a shining moment for us. It always is at Verizon, but I would say that was great. But we also gave customers more data. So every customer had an unlimited plan, got more hotspot data. Every customer that had a shared data on us for free for those first 2 months, as everyone was adjusting, and from international, long distance, et cetera. And we really rallied and said, the discussions that were happening about essential workers and those who serve, your first responders and military, we've had a long-standing commitment to in Verizon. And my team, very proud of them, looked at who else are we now hearing are those who serve, that those who take jobs that typically are not at the highest end of the pay scale, that generally serve the wider good, and are we doing enough for them? And we expanded our best pricing for our unlimited plans and across our Verizon Fios internet plans to nurses and teachers on top of military and first responders. So we're very proud. And we were able to do that, something that would normally take months, within 30 days that we got into market, and we're able to, and that's a permanent program. That's something we're now committed to in our Those Who Serve segments. And those are just one of many different programs that we launched in this very much rally moment for all of us across the company to say, what more can we do? We donated more than $50 million from our foundation to different charitable, supporting first responders, supporting No Kid Hungry. Those efforts are who we are. And again, we talked about it every day. Our leadership team put a noon call every day. It's going on right now. So a lot of Verizon people are probably tuned into that, really having those difficult and sometimes uncomfortable conversations, but important ones. Right now, we have 3 of my colleagues who are Black men talking about their experiences on a different webcast that's going on right now. And we've been having those discussions for the last couple of weeks, and they're wonderful because we learn, we listen, and we change our policies, and we're looking to help change policies of society as a whole. And so all these things coming together at this time have been wonderful. Forbes actually recognized Verizon as the #1 large company responder to the COVID crisis. And I think that says a lot about our senior leadership team at the top. You've asked me, Jonathan, who are leaders that I look at, and I think our executive.
Who do you inspire? Who inspires you?
Right now, I'd say our senior exec team at Verizon, we call them the Verizon Leadership Council, or the VLC, never been more impressed with our actions. I talked to my team, which is probably close to 150 people. And the general sentiment is many of us have been with the company a long time. Not everybody. Some have been, earlier, but never been more proud to be at Verizon than right now. And that says a lot for the company and how we're responding in this crisis to everybody, to employees, to all those stakeholders. I would say the shareholders is the one that we've put to the side right now. And so let's focus on employees, not to the side completely, because our focus being on employees and customers and society ultimately will have returns for our shareholders. And we know that. And we're very focused on that right now.
That's a really great attitude. And sadly, I see it in too few companies that they take doing the right thing. Yeah. And if you were to pick one particular inspiring leader who you've worked with over the years in any crisis or any situation, who would you nominate by name, and what qualities have you admired about them in a crisis?
This one's a hard question because there's about 50 people I could mention, and probably 10 that I would love to mention. But I was thinking about your question when you've asked me this before in our discussions, Jonathan, about what do I view as inspiring leadership, or what do I view as great leadership overall? And what I was finding myself thinking about was the juxtaposition of these kind of things with leadership. That what I love about an excellent leader is that they have to be brilliant, but alternatively, they know they don't have all the answers, that they are completely confident and exude that confidence, yet have a massive amount of humility. And the other one is that they have a ton of vision. It can drive like the mission for the organization at the kind of the big thinking level, but also understand that the details matter. Every little thing matters. Every part of the customer experience matters. And then one that doesn't have that juxtaposition is that they're always human. They're always just authentically human. And so when I think back to leaders like that, I have a handful of them. And again, our VLC today, many of them in that our CEOs of our different business groups, our CMO and our CEO for all business groups our head of HR, all of them exude these characteristics. But Bob Mudge was the leader of our wireline division for a number of years. I worked for him, and he had the ability to distill complex things down simply. And he exuded all those things that I said, that he was brilliant, but he was completely relied on his team and empowered them to find the answers, and knew that he didn't have them all. He was completely humble, and he could go out to our field forces and talk to our technicians and be as comfortable there as to the board. I learned a lot from him, and he gave me a lot of chances. And there were a lot of other people that have done that along the way for me too. So if you make me pick one, I'll say him.
Yeah, no, thank you for his story. My curiosity is, few organizations have a real pool of talent of that level. Clearly, there's been a number of generals and special forces guys on this series that Ben and I are doing. And they train people up. They spend thousands of pounds developing leaders. But most businesses never spend very much. If they spend $2,500 on someone, they think that's an awful lot of money to develop them as a leader. But it sounds like Verizon has that ability to have a real pool of talent, and leadership does matter. How important is leadership to Verizon and the development of leaders?
Yeah, I think our business will make or break on the leadership and what we do with our employee base overall, and having them all be empowered to make decisions. And when you're a company, and we operate in a matrix, when you're at the scale of, we have 80 million roughly consumer customers in, phone customers alone. If you add our business group, you're 130 million customers that we're serving every day, 130,000 employees. Like the scale of operation that we do, I always say that it's no different than running a small business. The difference is it just adds zeros. You have to make decisions on the consumers and how you think about the details and the little things. The other difference, though, is we do a lot of that in a matrix. You become, defined in more of an expertise because at the scale we are. So you have to figure out how to work across that matrix, cross-functionally. And that's not always easy, because there'll be a lot more, I'd say, debates about what we should do. There's a lot more people at the table helping make the decisions. So in that case, you actually learn to be better colleagues. You learn that diversity is our strength because it makes us better. So when I look at all of that, like how we do leadership training, some of it's on the job based on the organizational structure of a huge company and a huge matrix. Because you won't survive if you're not a good leader. You won't be able to have the results. The other part of it is, though, we have a lot of leadership training that we do. Our CEOs over the last couple of CEOs have made the top leadership, about 300 people, a curriculum that we go through usually 2 or 3 times a year that are customized specifically for the top leaders. And we start to instill that into our culture, the things that come out of that. And we know that all leaders have been through that same training. So it absolutely is a critical part of our focus.
Which leads me on to the next question, which is, it's no good having a leader if you don't have a good team. And you've been in many teams. You want followership as well as leadership. And I think it's General Jonathan Shaw said that, leadership is getting people to do what you want them to do because they want to do it. And I quite like that as a quote. But what about teams? What if you've been in a good team in a crisis, and so many of us have teams in a crisis right now? What qualities did the team show, and what was the crisis scenario you could describe?
I'll use I could use today's. Certainly we've done a lot with COVID and the team coming together, and the general block and tackle rule is what I would say, to use a football, a U.S. football analogy for you.
We're educated. We get it.
So, I'd say that people kind of really start to look at what we need to have done, and we align. So, but if I look at Hurricane Sandy, which was a different time, so I can talk a lot about COVID, but during Hurricane Sandy, there was an inspiring part about this is an opportunity. So it wasn't looking at the crisis of just a response and what we had to do. We had lost a huge portion of our network, meaning it was gone. Like copper So this was when the Superstorm Sandy hit, say, southern Manhattan from both sides, and there was flooding, 7-8 feet across the southern part of Manhattan, and our network was heavily copper still, in what a lot of even wireless transmissions, about 80% end up running across landline networks or wireline fixed networks. But a lot of our southern Manhattan was copper still, and it got wet, and copper doesn't do well with water. And so our network was gone. And what would have been, the leadership team from our field operations, I was doing marketing and sales, but at the same time, we were all together as a team to say, how do we respond to our customers? They're going to be out of service for a little while, but how do we rally the troops across the country, get everybody here? What do we need to do to replace our network, and not replace copper, but we rewired all of downtown Manhattan in a very short period, something that had taken years to build, partnerships with the city, partnerships, with our vendors for fiber, and rewired all of downtown Manhattan. And again, it was $1 billion of network damage. And we did that very much as a team to say, this is a chance to not only fix, but like innovate and take all of this chance to go to a new level. And we were able to do that very quickly. So sometimes I think leadership is taking crises and seeing how you change for the better at the afterwards. And even taking COVID, one of the things that I love that our CEO did, and CFO publicly, was right when this happened in the economic crisis, we knew, the likelihood of recession, companies pull back, companies do that. We announced an increase of $500 million in our capital spend for this year alone on 5G to show the basically good corporate leadership to say, you know what, this is a time we should invest more, not pull back. And certainly in the infrastructure in the U.S. And we did that. We committed to an additional $500 million, and on Verizon's scale of capital, it's still a lot of money.
Yeah, it certainly is. And also it's been on our minds so much about Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
What's your view of what's happening in America? I mean, you can see what's happening around the world, and what actually, rather than just be talk, what actually is going to change?
Yeah. I hope a lot. And the one thing that I am probably more happy about is that the conversations now are more diverse, meaning those of us that are in positions of privilege, I think, are recognizing our need to react and respond and be more than just disagreeing with policies or seeing those policies, but actually taking action ourselves. I'd say the diversity of the protests are inspiring to me, because I think it was the artist Banksy had said something about, which I loved how he put it. He's like, if there's a leaky pipe in your neighbor's apartment upstairs, it's hard for you to fix it. And I'm paraphrasing what he said, but it's very true. If you think about white society with the privilege that we have, it's as much our job, if not more, to fix the systematic racism that exists. And it does. And first of all, to not admit that it exists is a complete flaw. And, I work for a company that has always, certainly championed diversity. We were thrilled yesterday with the Supreme Court ruling here in the US on LGBTQ rights and transgender rights and the workplace. So that was certainly a watershed moment. And we will celebrate that. But Black Lives Matter, we're celebrating in the sense of the conversations, the raw and real conversations that need to happen. And that even our policies that we think are good are still likely not enough. And it's those, I need to listen and learn more. And we've done more of that, having conversations with my teams. And we've created toolkits that our HR team and our leadership team has put out there for every employee to be able to use in having these conversations and what they can do. And yesterday we announced some actions you can take, places that you can volunteer. We're doing a walk that you can actually walk to raise awareness, but also we have a volunteer commitment in our company. And one of them, like just one example, is to translate digitally letters from slaves. Like there are things that we can do that while we're working from home that do impact, like the stories, the understanding of the history, and those things matter. all of it matters. And I think it's just a raw conversation. I certainly don't have all the answers, but my colleagues that are willing to help me listen and learn, and also to call out and to be more actively anti-racist is probably I'd say the obligation of all of us in leadership.
Yeah. Now I could ask you a whole load of different questions on different things, and we'll come back to that perhaps about the charity work you do in the Lower East Side Girls. Perhaps you could talk about that just very briefly. But then I want Ben will be just checking in on how we're doing with questions and things and his quickfire questions. But would you just talk about the work you do to support a charity in New York and what's so important about that, linked to Black Lives Matter as well?
Yeah, it is. In a sense that, so the Lower East Side Girls Club in New York, so there's Girls and Boys Clubs of America. In New York, in 1996 or so, whenever the Boys Clubs and Girls Club joined forces, in New York, they remained independent. So the Girls Club it's focused on young girls between the ages of 8 and 18. And so serves a very diverse part of the city in the Lower East Side. Most of the girls that we support come from the New York Housing Authority housing development across the street from where our facility is. But we focus a lot on STEM programs. So, from science, technology, engineering, and math, but also art, and really helping these young girls understand their potential and giving them programs and activities and ways to learn how to code. We have a planetarium in the facility. And I think about the work that the Girls Club staff does to inspire these young women, many of whom most of whom are Black and brown, about the potential opportunities they have, and to, just put that spark of interest in something they may want to explore more, and providing them programs, even like summer camp, which we normally do. This year, we won't be able to do our summer camps that most of these girls would never have the opportunity to do. And right now, we've really shifted during COVID with the Girls Club, focusing on the needs of the families, which has been food, like providing meals even. And that's the role that this type of charitable organization can do in society. And we get a lot of support, but not probably enough. There's so much more we can do. And, I think back, I've talked a lot about, I grew up in a small town, as you mentioned, and I grew up with complete community support, complete parental support, like a lovely place to grow up. We did not have money, but I did not have negative exposure. And I think that's one thing I realized when these young girls, they have systemic racism that they might have to overcome. They maybe have a family member in prison. A significant portion do. There's a significant portion of the kids in the Lower East Side still do not graduate from high school. I think it'd be shocking. It's like over 50%. And so, like, you realize that there's a lot of drugs. There's a lot of in the neighborhood, or even maybe in their families, that they don't get the support. That I never had that negative influence. So I think there has to be something that overcomes that for these girls. And I think that's a lot of what the mission of this is to provide that positive alternative. And so if interested, girlsclub.org, anybody that's listening or tuned in, we always could use more support. We have our virtual gala, our biggest annual fundraiser, next Thursday. So very excited about that. Rosario Dawson, the actress, is hosting it, and we'll have some special guests. Last year, Colin Kaepernick joined us at it and was honored. He's been a very big supporter of the Girls Club here in New York. So we're thrilled with the work we do. We just know we have a lot more of it to do.
Well done, Angie. Thank you. I'll pass you over to Ben now. Ben, over to you, and just see how we're getting on with questions and things.
Great. Angie, so good to have you on board. It's been lovely to hear about your experience, your work, and how your company has dealt with this sort of ever-changing crisis. It amazes me how quickly that you seem to have been able to move with such a large company. Mm-hmm. How on earth do you guys do that?
Well, so the one thing I will say, like, our networks matter, and having the best networks allows us to make changes faster for our employee base, et cetera. So, we deal with crises a lot, but the other thing that I would say balancing with this crisis is not just a normal, hey, we're running, it's our job, and you're at 100-mile-an-hour for a while, you're also doing it while everyone's home life has changed. Their kids are home. They're, fighting for space with their, spouse, maybe that's also working from home. Like all of this work was done in a time when the surround was changed for every employee that was doing it. And, being on that treadmill, I say we were being on I was on the treadmill for those first couple of weeks, but not losing any weight because I was stuck to a Zoom meeting. But it's like, that this has been a unique experience, and very unique from any other crises we've ever dealt with. And I don't think we'll probably ever go back to how things were. I will say I've been impressed, and I'm sure that most people have, at how well we have adjusted to being on a video camera all day long,
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to throw it open to the people that are watching. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you've got questions for Angie, it'd be great to hear from you. So please do put them in the comments. Be lovely to hear from you. So while we're doing that, we always do like a quick fire round, so we can sort of give people a bit of time to think of questions and post them. And we always do this around the habits and the way you sort of live your life, which has made you successful, Angie. So we put this in 3 buckets: so healthy, wealthy, and wise. So I'll jump in with healthy. So obviously you've gone through a really successful career and had lots of different challenges and it sounds like met a few crises head on during that time. How have you maintained your health both physically and mentally during all those sort of tougher times?
I was going to say like red wine. They say that like 1 glass a day is healthy. I don't know that I'm meeting that standard, but no, I would say, one thing I try to do, I don't do it as well as I should. So I'm completely not going to lie. I run. I try to run at least a few times a week. I don't do as much as I used to in terms of the length and duration. The other thing I would say I'm pretty good is I keep very close touch with my family. I lost my mother last year, but my father and sister and husband and 4 kids, I probably talk with them multiple times a week, maybe more than they want to. And also my friends. I am a hyper loyal friends. And so I try to get my work-life balance to have its personal connection is really important to me. I will say that's been the hardest thing for me with COVID is I live alone. I'm single. And as a result, like the personal connection of human touch, like, I feel bad for the people when this fully opens up on the amount of hugs I will give to people that haven't seen me in a long time. But the personal connection of we're using video calling and staying more connected with my friends and family probably than ever before has been really critical. And I think that's for our mental health too. Really important.
Yeah, totally. I think that's the biggest thing. I'm lucky to have family in the house, so do have that physical contact. But it must be a massive thing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple of questions.
I do joke though on the alternative of that, Ben, is I'm not certain if it's better to be cooped up alone or cooped up with people, because you probably sometimes the health of your family members are not good either.
I think there's lots of people who are feeling that pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
My mother, for example, she's feeling that pressure of being cooped up with me. So we've got a couple of questions come in on the feed, a couple of interesting ones. So I suppose this is more of an opinion, which is interesting around. I'll put it up on the screen, but a playbook approach. Why do you think we were surprised by COVID, especially when the POTUS and Bill Gates warned that it was a feasible threat? Was it just too big to have a contingency?
Oh, that's a good.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's actually a great question. And like as a corporation, I'm certain we had crisis moments where what if we had to move employees? And we kind of operated in a playbook that existed. I'd say for the country, we did not have a good enough playbook. I think it's been. What was the last pandemic? This was it the 60s, but probably not at this scale. I mean, talking about the 1918 Spanish flu, when we have talked more about that. I've read more about that than I ever did before, and I realized I didn't learn about it in school.
Yeah.
So I think some of it was it just feels too distant from when it's ever really happened before, and it's just short-term thinking. And I think it's a really good lesson for us that this will happen again. We're a more connected society. if there's a virus, the likelihood that it spreads at this level. And I mean, the positives are, I listened to a podcast recently about 4 years. I think it was mumps was the shortest vaccine ever created. It took 4 years. But the way that science and how we're advancing the testing and how many multiple options in labs already, clearly that will beat that by a while, but it's still going to be probably a year and a half, before we have a vaccine. So I think, and it's a great question. I'd say from a government perspective, we've got more to do. And from a corporation perspective, it's time for us to look at all of our playbooks that we do have and make sure the scale of the disaster. I would say I felt Verizon. The playbooks we had for other disasters were just used at a larger scale in this one, and we were able to operationalize that very quickly and very effectively. But certainly not every company could do that. And we're very lucky to be in the type of industry we're in, which is almost a requirement. Home broadband and wireless right now became more essential than it ever has.
Yeah, totally. I think it's one of those things where so many people have warned everybody that this was a possibility, that a pandemic is something that's definitely going to happen in our future. But no one's got almost the ability to actually imagine that happening on a global scale, unless it's happened in your lifetime.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And very difficult to plan for. Even as we saw it happening in different countries, we were still thinking, well, we'll be okay. Most countries.
Well, it's happening now, Ben. If you think about it, we've gotten, look what's happening, I'd say, in lots of parts of the U.S. is we closed down for a while. We had fatigue from closing down, and now we're seeing places like Arizona with over 90% increases, Florida spiking. I mean, the reality is it's still here, and it's still here and very material, and we've still got to be socially distancing and taking precautions and wearing masks and doing all those things.
Wishful thinking doesn't help.
No.
So that was a question from James Richardson. Thank you, James. So we've got another one from Richard Goff. So if there's one change, Angie would like to see in how organizations are led, what would it be?
Probably more diversity at the top. More women and people of color. That's, it's certainly, I'm lucky to work in the company I am, but I would say we still have room to go there. If I look at our executive level, we need more women and more people of color. Our board is pretty diverse. I think we've got about 50% of our board being a diverse board. But that's another area for every company to look at, that ultimately that matters. And we've got to start to build those opportunities and build up the leadership. And that's, Jonathan, to your point about leadership development and training, heavily focused in those areas. It matters. It's society. So I think that's probably one area I'd like to see even more.
Yeah. I think it's another thing that we're often and have been very blinkered about. I think that people see change happen, but it's not happened quick enough, and it's not happened deep enough. Thanks, Richard. So another question from Sean here.
Can I pick up on Sean Taylor? Because Sean I know well.
Yeah, absolutely.
We served in the army together. And Sean is now doing some excellent work in financial services. But he writes one of the best blogs that's come up during the crisis. I recommend you read Sean's blog. But Angie, what about, he's looking at female leaders in different countries like New Zealand, Germany.
Yes.
And they've done so much better than the male strongmen leaders like Boris and Trump. What's your view?
There's no female here that has any kind of question about why this is, or no surprise. No, there's probably a lot of men that don't have any surprise on this either. But I think it's actually, in this case, it's a human crisis. And I think the ability to lean into the humanity part of that, women are generally very good at, and understanding that, bringing people together is better than trying to divide people and try to make it a political thing when it's not. And I think that's the challenge in the U.S. right now, is it's started to become political. And we can't eschew science and reality. We've got to trust the experts that we have. And granted, there has been flaws there too, that, this was a novel virus. So it was changing. And the understanding and willingness to be okay with the guidance might change a little bit as we learn. That's what learning is when it's a novel virus. And it's just like anything, anybody that changes their mind over time and thinks differently because they've learned something more. We sometimes have a desire to penalize them in the political sphere. When it's in something like this, it has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with the fact that we've got to continue to learn and adjust and react. And I think the female leaders, certainly have done a better job focused on the societal part of this and the human part of it versus the politics part of it.
I think it's a great question from Sean, and I think the comment male strongman leaders is really poignant within this, because all those leaders that you mentioned, Jonathan, and people like Bolsonaro in Brazil, they made this crisis about them, and it didn't make it about the people, which is obviously the most important factor. New Zealand's such a great example. Fantastic, thanks, Sean. So another question. Excellent talk. Can you tell us how you support people with mental health challenges such as autism and anxiety that are exacerbated during this crisis times?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think this is a corporate responsibility too, is to understand and have the resources available. So certainly at Verizon, we have, whether it's crisis lines or support lines for people that need support with our healthcare overall, and just recognizing your own mental health and when you need a break and when you need to step away, and having those conversations with your immediate leader, your boss, about that. Like, there were times, I think one weekend we had been on calls, it was like 12 hours a day for about, I think it was like 12 days in a row at the early parts of the crisis. And I was starting to realize that my level of blood pressure in certain calls was starting to go up. I'm like, I need a breather. I need a breather. I need to take a half a day. Like, so, and it was a Sunday, by the way, at the time, because we were in a crisis mode early. And then what we realized is this wasn't a sustainable thing for all of us that were running on that pace and starting to set rules like, 12 to 1 every day, no meetings after 6 p.m. Like, setting those kind of things for the company to help with just the level of change here. But for people with autism or anxiety, there's a lot more complexity in that, and making sure that the tools that you have, the personal coping mechanisms, and also leveraging many companies, certainly if you work for a company like the scale of a larger company, are going to have resources and tools for you, and to fully use those. I think sometimes we're ashamed to use those, even, those of us that may not have diagnosed autism or anxiety, but there are times we get anxiety, and utilize those tools, even if it's not something that's part of your life every day. And we also recognizing as leaders that some of our, best employees might have these parts of their lives that they're unwilling to share, and there's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah, that's and thanks to Kate. I think it's McEwen who asked that question. Really, really important during these times. I know people are really struggling, and it's almost like it sort of emotionally grinds you down over time. So really important.
One thing I'll add to that is, don't forget to take your vacation. I think because this, like, you can't go anywhere, I've fallen into this where I like saving up all my vacation for the next time that I might actually go someplace, and look at my wanderlust list. Ultimately, I need to take a vacation. I took 2 days off. I know this is going to sound sad, but I took 2 days off, and I cleaned out my closet. It was the first 2 days I've taken off this year, a couple weeks ago.
Wow.
And I'm like, you know what? It was a sense of accomplishment, and it didn't have my brain working in the normal way it works. Because if it was not a task that I had committed to do, like that, where it was just, I needed to do that. Like, some people have gardens, some people do that. Like, take the time and separate from the brain thinking, because your body needs it.
Can I add to that, Angie? A couple of the other leaders that Ben and I have worked with, they say that as the leader, you have to take a long weekend. So not this weekend, but the next weekend, I'm going to take a long weekend. And we're looking after Lee's mum, who's got Alzheimer's and lots of at-risk things. But her sister's going to look after her. So we're going to have a long weekend away from caring for the last 3 years that we've been doing. And then we're going to take a summer holiday in August, and we've cleared it out. We're not going anywhere, but we're just not looking after her mum, and we'll have a break and we'll just have a staycation. And if leaders don't take these breaks, all the leaders have talked about it, the leaders got to lead by example. They've got to say, I'm on a long weekend. I'm not here Friday and Monday, and not be there, not to answer things. Just don't be there. Trust your deputy, appoint someone as your deputy, and get them to lead, so that the others go, oh, well, if Angie's taking time off, it's okay for me to take time off. But if she never takes time off, I can't take time off either. And we saw this in the US military when we worked alongside them, that they were particularly hardworking. So the general would come in after his morning run at 4:30. He'd come in and be working at 6. So the colonel felt he had to come in before the general, and the major felt they had to come in before and so the poor old private soldier, I mean, he went to bed last and he got up first, and like, it was just not fair. So they called it out. The guys went, this is ridiculous. Just show up when you got to do your work. But you've got to, as a leader, take the holidays and the breaks so that others know it's okay to do so, rather than say, yeah, take holidays, guys. I'm not taking holiday, but you take holidays. Like, don't send emails the weekend, but I'll send you emails on Sunday. No, don't send them emails on Sunday, because they'll all respond to them.
That's right.
Yeah. It's also a great opportunity for your deputy to get experience as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Stepping into your shoes. Another good question from Jim. Throughout history, during times of crisis, leaps in innovation take place. What will Verizon's contribution be?
So this is a good question, Jim. I know Jim from long times of working with him over the years. I would say that Verizon's contribution is probably going to be our leaning into our network overall, working from home, and making sure that all of our networks are able to change the way that, teachers teach and employees are able to do their work. And I think when we have a very big focus on sustainability in Verizon as well. And one thing I loved about the COVID crisis, if there's anything to love, is that we've proven that our impact on climate with commuting, all that can be quite changed by working from home. And part of the enablement of that is the networks and that we build at Verizon and that we support for home broadband and our wireless network. And so I think 5G is going to change a lot of how society works on that front as well, and doubling down our investment in 5G ultra wideband in addition to just the 5G story overall. We were the first in the world to launch 5G, and we're going to be the best. And I think that contribution is part of our history. It's not just part of the crisis, but I think we're leaning into it even more and seeing how it can change how we operate in society overall. So thanks, Jim, for the question.
Lovely. Okay.
He asked who my hero was. I would have to say.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a hard one for me, but I'll throw out my dad, who's just a wonderful guy, and he's always believed in me and never put any barriers or goalposts that out there for me. Just said, whatever you want to do, I'd support you. And I think that's probably parenting's best approach. And he has. So.
Lovely. And Matthew's question: there remains a view that to reach C-suite in large corporate, you have to be educated above a master's level, often seen as a gateway, but could inhibit diversity. What's your perspective on that?
I think it's a good question. And frankly, I don't have a master's. So I think this is a BS requirement. Just kidding. No. I know that a lot of the leaders that we have in companies don't have masters. Now they have a lot of history and a lot of, they may be in the industry. I think as people bounce around, I think there's a view of that, but I'd say it depends on the industry. And I don't think it's a requirement. I think ongoing learning is a requirement, and demonstrating that you have been willing to, invest in your ongoing education beyond just your job. How I know Jonathan is through this marketing academy, that the marketing academy, which is a wonderful program based in Europe, but has expanded. I'm in the first cohort in the US. It takes a lot of CMOs from a lot of companies and brings us together, and it's a really great development, but it's cross-functional development as well. The network is great. So the company Verizon has agreed to invest in me in that, and but it's also an investment in my time, and I was the one that applied and wanted to be part of this. So because I know that I've been at Verizon 19 years, and for people that change companies, they get different learnings than someone that has changed a lot of roles in a same company. But man, the pace of change at Verizon has taught me a ton. Like, right, I've had 1 billion roles, and it feels like in Verizon. So I've never felt like I'm stuck, but I do know that I can learn from others, and I want to continue to invest in that. So even if it's not a formal MBA program, I don't think that's necessarily required. I think your track record shows your ability to lead, and that you're willing, that you've continued to stay ahead of the curve on learning and knowing, whether that's with a formal degree program or not. Do I support formal degree programs, and do we hire a lot of people that have MBAs? Yes. And by the way, a lot of them are smarter than me, which is great. And that's also the role of a leader, is to hire people that are better at things than you are. And so I don't think it's mandated. I think it is a nice to have if you have the time and the financial ability to do it. I would always encourage it, but I don't think it's mandated.
Great. Can I pick up the next one? If you could put up Phil Summerfield.
Sure.
Ben.
Absolutely.
So Phil, nice to have Phil on. Phil has been a very successful business leader who then in later life became an executive coach, and he's a friend of mine. And so he's got a good question. So Angie, do you think that females are better prepared and willing to be, using the Harvard term, the incomplete leaders? So incomplete leaders leading complete teams that were always work in progress. Do you think females are better prepared to have that vulnerability and humility?
This one's a tough one, because I think females generally, and I'm guilty of this personally, are less willing to take the risks when they're not fully prepared. As a general thing, we see it. I see it with people in my team when people don't feel confident to take the next role, the next step, because they're like, I might need a little bit more. I'm not certain I'm ready. I see that more with women on questioning their ability because they don't have all the boxes checked for that role than say men. I think that's a general discussion that a lot of women leadership programs you'll talk about, is that willing to kind of jump into the deep end before you know all the answers. I think women do well when they're there, but the confidence to actually jump in the deep end of the pool is not as confident. So we've got to build in women the risk the willingness to take the risks more often than they may be willing to today, because I do think they will be better performance oftentimes when they are there, because of the humility of not believing you know all the answers, and to help build teams, which is a skill that a lot of women, and that's, by the way, a skill that men and women can have, and that men and women cannot have. So to me, it's about leadership overall, and taking the willingness to take the risk.
You are so right. And my wife Lee did some research, interviewed 200 women for her book Inspiring Women Leaders, and time and again, when she went to got in touch with one of the women that others had recommended, she's really inspiring, Lee would speak to them. They go, "Oh no, I'm not inspiring, but I know somebody else who is. There's this person." She goes, "No, I'm staying with you because you're the one that they're saying." And there was almost like they wouldn't go for certain roles because they had 9 out of 10 of the qualities, whereas the blokes would blag it. "Oh, I've got 50%. I'll have a go at it." No, we want and at the last minute, female headhunting colleagues who I know get so saddened by the fact that they've got a really good female candidate. She's just about to take the role. "Oh no, perhaps I'm not quite ready yet." No, you are. Please don't do that. You are so ready. Now, time is what it is, and Ben's going to have the final question about. He always likes to ask about books and things like that for you. Okay. But before we do that, just a really pointer for those listening, we're delighted to have over 220 people listening in today. Next Tuesday, this is every Tuesday at 5 till 6 p.m. UK time. Next Tuesday, we have the Lord Mayor of London, William Russell, who I know well and have a lot of respect for. The week after, we have Dave Hudson. Dave is an executive at Thales, defense contractor, and 4 tours with the Special Air Service, the SAS. The week after that, Alistair Kett also served in the Army as adjutant of 1 Royal Regiment of Fusiliers, and now a very successful partner at PwC. Followed by Richard Fenning, who'd been he's now an advisor, and he was the former global CEO of Controlled Risks. Followed by Chuka Umana, who is a board advisor now and was a former British member of Parliament. Fascinating guy, and tipped for the leadership in Parliament, but he's chosen not to do that, which is a great shame. Wayne Hudson, the MD or CEO of Nomad of Birdseye, the part of Nomad Foods, followed by James Cameron, the VP of Leadership at Walmart stores in Bentonville in the USA, and more. So we've got some great people coming up, and stay tuned every Tuesday. We'll be saying
I started my career at Walmart as an intern.
Oh, there you know. It was the making of you. It was the making of you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great stuff.
Thanks,
So just to wrap up, it's just be nice to finish those quick fire questions because it was nice to complete the set. So healthy, wealthy, wise. We did healthy, wealthy. Is there any piece of money advice that you give or you've been given that you live by?
Spend less than you make, I suppose, is probably the best. I would say one thing I like to do, even I think about the Girls Club, is that I don't think money is talked about enough. And read the books. If you're not exposed to money, you weren't exposed. If you grew up, without a family that invests or knew about investment, I mean, I think that's, if you were kind of a hand to mouth, it's a more intimidating thing. So my recommendation is to read a lot. When I was young in my career, I read a lot about just financials and how to get ahead and how to save money, and bought a house early because I knew that would be a good probably investment at the time the market was going up. So certainly I'm smart with my money, but I also know to spend some of it to have a little fun. So I try to see the world with it.
Nice. And is there a saying or piece of wisdom that you strive to live your life by?
I would say live my life. I'll go with a corporate one. When I was in college, there was some speaker at one thing, and I remember he had said, which is a quote from I'm not certain whom, the people that know how will always work for the people that know why. And I kind of embraced that and thought, I need to know why. I always need to know why. I need to look to play the position above me on why I'm working on something to make it a bigger thing. And what I realized over time is that even that statement by itself is the people that know how that will work for the people that know why has a separation between the two. And as a leader, I've always thought we should have very few people that don't know why. Like, in fact, everyone should know why. We should all be part of the why, because the only way you're going to do good how is if you know the why. So as a leader, I'd say I have tried to bring in everybody to have that vision and understanding of what we're trying to accomplish, so that the how part is part and parcel of that versus separated as a, go do.
Yeah, no, great answer. Yeah. Our previous CEO, Jeff Weiner, does something when people often bring him questions. He doesn't just ask why, he asks why 5 times or more until so it comes down those layers, which is quite intimidating, I believe, but it does actually get to the kernel of why you're actually doing something. Final question: is there a book which has been important in your life, or even just one that you love at the moment?
Yeah, I have like a list of books that I like oftentimes refer back to. When leading people, first break all the rules, like the whole Einstein quote about, a fish up a tree. Like you think, like if you, those, it's true. Like you have to understand the strengths of your people. So I always think about that. The other one that I read recently, which my boss had asked me to read, I think based on how my brain works, it was Thinking Fast and Slow, which is not the easiest read in terms of a quick read. It's not, but it's a very good as a marketer and an intuitive person that naturally gets to, but I always want to back it with data. That my brain recognizing the gaps that I didn't realize I was having, because I have a lot of data and a lot of information that's getting me to an answer that I might not be spending. I might get there too quickly and need to spend more time understanding a broader part. So how your brain works and how you miss major things. It's a fascinating book about the psychological performance of the human mind. And as a marketer, I think it's really important to understand that too. So both of those are great books.
Fantastic. And thanks for everyone that's been listening. We've had some great questions, and there's loads of comments on the stream there, Angie, that are just saying thanks, Angie, and really appreciate the information. So such a lovely interview, and it's really great to meet you as well.
Yes, thanks for having me, Ben. It was lovely to meet you. Jonathan, as always, you both are wonderful, inspiring people, and thanks for doing this and this whole series. I look forward to tuning in onto the next ones as well.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks so much.
Right, thank you.
Take care,
Bye,
guys. Love you. Happy all on the series. Bye for now.